Good morning, everyone. We're going to be starting in a few minutes, but thank you for joining.
All right, good morning, everyone. We'll get started in 2 or 3 minutes, okay? Welcome to everyone. Glad you all could be here. Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, Antoine Thompson, Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. Excited for you all to be here. Welcome, 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 welcome. If this is your first time joining us, we do this every month, 10 a.m. Usually to 11, but today we're gonna go just a little longer because we have all these dynamic women leaders who are trailblazing in the clean energy, clean transportation industry. Some good movers and shakers. That's right. I'm just so excited. This is our fourth year fourth event that we've put on. And so we're just so excited that they could join us today. So really excited about that. So really excited about that. I want to again say good morning. We're thrilled to have an incredible lineup of speakers, each bringing unique experience and perspectives on the intersection of energy, sustainability, and transportation. So we're really excited for our speakers today. This industry is the transportation and clean energy sector is rapidly evolving, and women continue to play an essential role in driving innovation, policy, impact, and change as well. And let's also talk about creating jobs and improving lives as well. So really excited about that. Today's presentation will highlight the work of women leaders who are not only advancing clean energy and transportation solutions, but also are working to ensure that these solutions are accessible, sustainable, and equitable as well. So we really appreciate them, and we know that they didn't get to these positions without a lot of hard work as well. So really excited about that. I want to just quickly make a few announcements before I turn it over to Blake Scholes. Just a few announcements. Number one, on Tuesday, March 18th, we're going to have our National Biodiesel Day webinar. So really excited about that. Hopefully you can join us for that webinar. We'll have a lot of discussion about how we can reduce pollution today in the transportation sector, utilizing biofuels, and particularly biodiesel, especially for our medium heavy duty vehicles. When you're going down those roads and you see all those diesel trucks, all that black smoke, we actually can have something we can use, a cleaner form of diesel for those big trucks. And so come on out, learn something, get involved. That's Wednesday, March 18th at 11 a.m. I also want to mention on April 1st, we'll have the opening reception for the Baltimore office. That's going to take place at M&T Bank in Baltimore, Maryland. So we'll put that in the chat. It's free. Hopefully you can attend. Should be a nice event. So come on out. It's going to be a great event. Baltimore kickoff reception. We expanded in Baltimore a year ago, and we're really excited about all the great work that we're doing in the Baltimore area. Want to thank everyone who came to our open reception in DC. Over 446 people registered, more than 300 people showed up. So we're really excited about that. But April 1st in Baltimore, save the date. The next thing I want to mention is the GWRCCC first annual Earth Day 5K walk, Green Expo, and vehicle display. That's going to be on a National Mall, 10 a.m. on April 19th. So sign up. We need everyone on here to bring all your family, your friends, your kids. We're going to have information tables, exhibit booths, and we're going to have a lot of different vehicles on display there as well. And we're going to be able to walk 5K for the environment, for the earth, for a better planet. So please make sure you save the date, April 19th. It's pre-Earth Day. It's big kickoff. So as in our office, every day is Earth Day, but for this event, it'll be the first annual. I'm hoping that this event, they do one in New York City that has tens of thousands of people. This is our first one, so we're going to try do our best to make it nice and big. But it only costs $25 to walk in the event. But we have exhibit tables. You can just display Exhibit tables, I think, are $500 for profit, $250 for nonprofit. To display a vehicle is $1,000 on the mall. Each additional vehicle, I think, is 500. But save the date, April 19th, Earth Day, 2025. We're going to be walking 5K for our planet, for our future. Last two things I want to mention is the annual conference is coming up April 28th. I'm sorry, our annual conference, the GWRCCC annual conference is October 23rd, 2025. So I want you all to make sure that you get involved. Save the date for that. We also have the Ron Flowers Golf Tournament on July 9th. So I wanted to mention that as well. That's going to be a presidential golf course as well. So we'll have some other announcements at the end. And if you are not a member, I see a lot of folks are on here today that are not members of Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. We would love for you to become a member today. So I will come back on at the end and give some closing remarks. But I want to just thank all of our team. We have a number of dynamic women on our team. The chair of our board is a woman as well, Jill Hamilton, who owns her own company. And we have women all on our board of directors and on our team, both as staff and consultants, all doing some very, very important work. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Blake Scholes, who is our marketing and outreach coordinator and a program coordinator for Greater Washington Region Clean Cities. Blake, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning.
And happy Women's History Month to all the women here too. I forgot to say that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Women's Clean Energy Industry webinar. So we're thrilled to have everyone, such an incredible lineup of speakers, each bringing unique expertise, perspective, and on the intersection of energy, sustainability, and social justice. And then to start, we have Veronica Bradley from Clean Fuels Alliance. She's the Director of Environmental Science at Clean Fuels Alliance. At Clean Fuels Alliance America, she leads initiatives to advance education and research on the climate benefits of bio-based diesel and sustainable aviation fuels. With a strong scientific background and legal expertise, she navigates complex environmental policies to promote a cleaner and more effective world. And Idealist, she collaborates with industry and academia to ensure accurate climate impacts assessments and advocates for smart, sustainable solutions. So whenever you're ready, Veronica, you can go.
Sure. Thanks, Blake, and thanks, Antoine. Thanks for having me here. Happy to talk a little bit about my background and being a woman in this space. I focus on at Clean Fuels, as Blake referenced, kind of the technical aspects of the benefits of our alternative fuel suite, biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. So thanks, Antoine, for shouting out for National Biodiesel Day next Tuesday and hosting a webinar. That should be a great event to learn a little bit about our alternative fuels. But my program focuses on ways that we can compare and explain the benefits and the environmental value of our fuels. So we use a lot of what we call life cycle assessment, which is just a technical framework for analyzing the environmental performance of our fuels across different technologies. So we can compare different fuel types like biodiesel or renewable diesel, what they're made of, against things like certainly petroleum diesel, as well as different technologies like electrification and all of that to figure out how to best support policies that are really based in the evidence of environmental performance and really trying to take out some of the bias, kind of our preconceived notions, I should say, about what the best solutions are. And we also work to help companies who are trying to decarbonize understand the differences, take into account differences in cost, and emission reductions and other environmental considerations. So my kind of passion, if you will, is that evidence-based policymaking in the environmental space. And I started doing all sorts of environmental analysis right after I graduated from undergrad. I moved here from Michigan and was doing a bunch of work as a contractor for EPA and their climate change division and their stratospheric ozone protection division. But I really wanted a seat at the table. I felt like I was young and ambitious and was doing all of these technical analyses, but wanted to help better inform the policy discussion. And I couldn't really do that from the sidelines. So I ended up going to law school here at American University, and really wanted to be able to kind of marry that technical knowledge with policymaking, and kind of wove through, had a couple different positions in the federal government and trade associations, and then ended up at Clean Fuels. And what I think was kind of ended up being, didn't really think about it at the time, but really ended up being kind of why I wanted to go to law school in the first place. So my position is as that kind of technical advisor, and help our lobbyists, our federal affairs team, our state affairs team, kind of understand what I think like good environmental policy making is, and really trying to make sure to focus on what we call kind of triple bottom line sustainability, right? So not just consider environmental performance, but take into account social impacts, economic viability. One of the things that and Antoine referenced about, biodiesel being able to get that black smoke out of our old heavy duty trucks. Biodiesel has co-benefits of reducing particulate emissions, which are, really nasty for public health. And are kind of lower cost options, as the role I see for clean fuels as helping to help with this energy transition and help immediately improve environmental outcomes and public health outcomes at a low cost now, while we endeavor on this, what I think is going to be a pretty long trajectory for transitioning away from fossil fuels. So I'll leave it there, but happy to answer questions and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And then we're now going to go to Brooke Smallwood from Oasis Energy Partners. She's a CEO and founder of Oasis Energy Partners, an innovative energy technology and consulting firm focused on energy equity, diversity, and justice, with over 20 years of experience in the energy sector. She has worked with Fortune 500 companies such as Honeywell, JCI, Lockheed Martin, and AECOM. A transitional leader, Brooke specializes in solving critical challenges related to climate change, energy equity, and environmental justice through data-driven solutions.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here today with everyone. But the topic of my discussion is actually going to be about the pivot. And so you've heard a little bit about my background. So I want to really talk about how many times in my career, my 20 plus career in energy, that I have done a pivot, and talk to you about what is significant about pivoting in your career, especially in energy, and especially as a woman in this field. So a career pivot, is a significant change in your career path. And there's three types. It's taking on a new role. It can be a new industry, sector, or even subsector, and it's taking on new skills. And so if I think back to my career, I was a communications and Spanish major in undergrad. And my first job right out of college was with Honeywell. I had no idea about HVAC, didn't know anything about it. But by that time, I was a pretty decent salesperson and I felt like I could sell anything. But coming into the HVAC space was definitely something that I was unaccustomed to. And I was part of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania branch. In my branch, there were no other women except for one admin. And there were no people of color whatsoever. So I'm sure you can imagine me coming in as a 22-year-old African-American woman who has no idea about the industry into this office of these amazing professionals who are really good at doing what they do, but no one looked like me. And so it was a sobering reality for me that if I wanted to be in this industry and in this career, that these were some of the obstacles that I was going to have to face. Um, and one thing that I decided to do in that role to learn the industry is I basically said, hey, can I get in a truck and ride with you today? Let me go on your jobs with you. So I rode with pipe fitters, steam fitters. I went with the HVAC folks. I went with the building controls people, and I shadowed them. I asked a lot of questions, and I started to gain knowledge just from doing the work and being around the work. And so very shortly, I was able to have entire discussions with school districts and other major customers about their HVAC equipment, about building automation. And I was actually recruited by Johnson Controls to be a systems integration specialist because of my affinity for building automation and controls. They ended up sending me to school within JPI, and I became one of 13 people in the country at that time for JPI who were actually system integrators. So my job was to get a building, let's say, that had a Trane building automation system to talk to a Johnson building automation system to talk to a Siemens automation system. How do we integrate all those three together with one central front end and control all three buildings? So that was my job. Every day I went out and discovered new ways and new solutions for my customers. But I was able to make the first pivot. After my controls background, I also did a very short stint in pharmaceutical sales. I think for me, it was really about my ability to sell, right? My ability to walk in a room and have a conversation about something that I was not an expert in. I'm not an engineer or anything like that. But to be able to get my point across and also to be very technically sound while I did it. I decided early on in my career that, especially as a woman, when I walked into those rooms, they automatically expected me not to know what I was talking about. And so, as many women, especially African American women, have to do, we have to actually know more. And we have to be able to answer the questions because a lot of times we're being tested constantly on what we know and why we deserve to be in the room. So one good example of that is I was at a training session. I'm in a room with five other, people getting trained. Again, only person of color, only woman in the room. The instructor asked a question. I raised my hand and gave an answer. And in front of all of my supposedly colleagues and peers, my instructor literally asked me, how did I know the answer? And where did I go to school? So this is nothing new. I think that many women in the industry have faced those type of questions where we have to constantly prove ourselves just to get our jobs done. But my first pivot was in 2009 when I joined Lockheed Martin on behalf of Pepco and Delmarva Power here in DC to manage their energy efficiency programs. Those programs were brand new. There were five of us at Lockheed Martin who started those programs. And so we all had to roll up our sleeves and figure out from a piece of legislation, what does it mean to run an energy efficiency program? There were no energy efficiency programs really at the time. And the only energy efficiency program that we had at that time to look towards was what they were doing in New Jersey. So we were able to take some of what they were doing in New Jersey, try to apply it to DC, but it was really uncharted territory. And so for the first time in my life, I was actually learning more about energy efficiency and also at the same time, literally doing program design. And so I started designing programs. I was the original designer of the retro commissioning program, monitoring based commissioning program, and the training program. All of those programs still run today. Those programs have been duplicated across the country. And I was able to bring a lot of my experience from being at buildings and understanding building controls and automation and all of those things, and be able to bring those skills to work every day and to build programs that were sustainable. And also at Lockheed Martin at that time was my very first time actually coming up with a data management system for the company to manage energy efficiency. And I'll talk a little bit about how that has come 360 in my life today. And so energy efficiency allowed me a new frontier. It allowed me an opportunity to make a big impact, right? So at this time, I have pivoted from HVAC and controls that I had done for about 10 years in my career, and now I'm in energy efficiency. And I was in that role with Lockheed Martin for about 8.5 years. And then I left that role to go over to the utility and became an employee of Pepco and Delmarva Power at that time, and led the commercial and industrial energy portfolio for the utility. And so I was across all implementation contractors and managed the entire C&I portfolio with one other person at the time. And so that was a very interesting time for me. I felt like those programs were my babies. I felt like I had birthed them and grew them for those years. So for about a decade of my life, I dedicated myself to those programs, and I felt very close to them, and I felt like they were my legacy. But I did get to a point where I believed strongly that I could even do more. I said, hey, if I were able to pivot between HVAC and then go to energy efficiency, I should be able to pivot again. So when the opportunity came along with WGL, so Washington Gas, I was with a company called WGL Energy, which was part of Washington Gas at the time. They offered me an opportunity to do DERs. Um, and I'm like, what is that? What's that all about? So of course I had heard about solar and other renewable energy, but had not really talked about distributed energy resources and what that means. And in the particular case of what we were doing at WGL Energy, we were dealing with gas, we were dealing with electric, and we were actually going out and buying energy assets. And we were also creating new energy assets. And this was truly uncharted territory at the time, because we were really coming up with projects that just didn't exist anywhere at that time. We were managing a huge portfolio of projects for the company and also going out and finding new projects. And so it was an exciting opportunity for me, and I took it. And so my family, everyone is like, why? You've been with the electric utility all this time. You've been doing this energy efficiency work. Why would you go and pivot to doing this DER stuff? It's new. You don't know as much about it. And I was so excited to learn. And so I took the jump. I went over to WGL Energy. I loved doing DERs. I learned as much as I possibly could about solar, about CHP, about, all of the different types of battery storage and all the options that we had available at the time. And it was great training ground for me, and it really expanded my horizons. And so, right around the time that WGL Washington Gas and Alta merger, our particular division did not come over with the merger. And so I was faced again with the fact that I was going to lose my job. And so just as I had done the pivot over to DERs, I was now facing another pivot that I was going to have to take on a new role. And possibly be in a different part of the sector again. And so I was lucky enough to get a job with AECOM. And AECOM's an amazing global company. And I was back being a consultant. And my very first assignment at AECOM, literally my first day of work, they're like, hey, we have your first assignment as a consultant. I'm like, great, what is it? And everybody in the room started kind of snickering and laughing. And I was like, what's the joke? And the joke was that I was going back to Pepco. They were sending me back to Pepco this time to start up EV programs for Pepco. So they said, hey, Pepco has these EV programs. They just got approved by the commission. They need someone who understands how to create new programs to go and finish the program design and do the full implementation and launch it in 6 months. And so I was like, I guess that's me. Because, you know, they're really, I knew at that time that I had a special talent. And I knew at that time that I had very much like the movies, right? Like a certain set of skills that gave me an advantage in the marketplace. And so I was completely unafraid to take on this new role. Even though I had no experience with EV to this point. Yes, I had driven a Prius at one time, but that's about it. So when you're talking about like setting up entire EV programs, residential, commercial, we had a mandate of putting in 300 public chargers. You know, what does that look like? How do I even start that? But I walked in the doors of Pepco and saw all my old friends and colleagues and was like, I'm back. And this time I was doing EV. So I did the program design for the EV Smart programs. Those are still in existence today. The original program design and implementation strategy and everything that I came up with is still working today. You know, I really am excited about that. But my last endeavor, of course, as you all know, is me becoming an entrepreneur with Oasis Energy Partners. So today I am no longer working for someone else. I'm working for myself. I'm using that certain set of skills that I have. The biggest pivot of my life was taking the step to be an entrepreneur. And I'm very proud of taking that step. And I just want to encourage everyone that when you get the call to pivot, and to be unafraid to move forward. And I'll leave you with this. I came up with just something to think about when you think about pivoting. Let me just get to my notes. Plan, innovate, visualize, operationalize, and transform. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Genevieve Cullen. She's the president of Electric Drive Transportation Association, a leading trade association promoting the electrification of transportation since 2015. She has spearheaded EDTA's efforts, advocating for policy solutions in energy, climate change, and transportation emissions. Genevieve has a strong background in energy policy, having served as Energy Counsel to Senator Evan Bayh and in various roles in both the executive and legislative branches. And she's also a graduate of the Washington College of Law and Bucknell University.
Thanks, Blake. Thanks, Antoine, and everyone for joining us all here today for this conversation. It's really amazing to be with this group of accomplished women, and I'm excited to hear all of these stories and how people have navigated a pretty dynamic landscape. Energy is a big term, and there's a lot of pathways in it. So it's a really great opportunity to have this conversation together. So I'll start by just, for those of you who don't know, let me give you a little glimpse into EDTA. It's a terrible acronym. We're working on it. One day we'll get something better. But the Electric Drive Transportation Association is a cross-industry association. We represent the value chain of electric transportation. And by electric transportation, I mean anything in which electricity moves the wheels. So it's hybrids, it's plug-in hybrids, it's battery electric, and it's fuel cell vehicles, and the whole infrastructure that supports that transportation. My members reflect that sort of panoramic view. They are vehicle manufacturers, electric utilities, companies in the materials and component space, as well as infrastructure developers. So we have a pretty you have a diverse group of companies and business plans. And as a leader in a trade association, if those of you who operate in those fields know that the key to that is finding a meaningful consensus on what needs to be done. And so we work together to understand where technology is going, where markets are going, and where policy is going, and to true up what we should be saying, doing, and advocating for in each of those areas. And it has been a ride. My organization has been around since 1989. I haven't been there since then, but it has been advocating for electrification since that time. And what people understand electrification to be has evolved materially over that time. And we have seen the dynamics of the marketplace and of the policy marketplace have changed a lot over those years. There's been feast and famine, and I think that is sort of a good metaphoric lesson for all of us working in this space. It is about resilience and being able to pivot, to grow and change with the marketplace and the landscape. And as Brooke said, so important to be nimble and being able to take things in a new direction. And the other piece of this current moment that I think can benefit from a little history is I also have my background. I've worked at the intersection of energy and technology in some form my whole career. And I have seen, and I've worked in the biofuel space and in renewable energy and in electric transportation. And it's always, if you look in the sort of like the Department of Energy's budgets, I think all of us who were on this call probably have some engagement with the Department of Energy, and that whole sort of alternative fuel portfolio has always been, when times get lean or the atmosphere gets a little bit not as positive towards alternative fuels, that's always the go-to move is to make the alternative fuel people scrap it out against each other for this small piece of a budget, right? And it's just it doesn't work to our benefit. That the fact is we need all of these solutions at the Electric Drive Transportation Association. I am for my solution. I'm not against anybody else's. So I think that that's an important lesson, is that, and forgive me, it's the childhood game that's burned in my head, is I'm thinking Red Rover, right? Like, let's hold on to it. Let's make a stand against the folks who would say that, to try to undo all this work we have done, and be resilient. We have, the policy trends come and go, but the markets continue to move forward. And I appreciate all the work that you all are doing in this space. And I'll leave it there, and I'll look forward to hearing what all the smart people on this call have to say.
Thank you for that. And then lastly, we have Indira Govan. She is the CEO of Color of Health, an organization dedicated to promoting health equity and improving healthcare access. She has led the organization since June 2020, working to address disparities and advocate for marginalized communities. Additionally, Indira serves as the executive director of International Business Kids, a role she has had since 1990, where she empowers youth through business, education, and global initiatives.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me on the call today. I come from a different perspective. Color of Health, of course, is a healthcare company. And when I look at being sustainable and clean energy, from my perspective, we help seniors and those with disabilities age gracefully in their home. It's expensive to be sick in America. And so we look at the perspective of how green energy can lessen the overall household budget. So is that solar panels? Is that non-emergency medical transportation that uses electric vehicles? Is that showing families how lessening their footprints through telemedicine and remote patient monitoring, is that adding to clean energy, reducing the steps it takes just to be seen by your physician? So we are also launching in Baltimore our remote patient monitoring system, doing a pilot program on April 1st. So Antoine and the association, let's talk about how we can collaborate on that day, reaching the same audience. Excuse me. Yes, so that's the perspective where we come from as I look at some potential cuts in the budget that will affect people with disabilities. For Color of Health, it's important that we speak to municipalities and legislators and show them ways to bring in these remote systems to make that chop lessen in affecting families with disabilities. So for years, I've been an advocate for communities of color around the country and will continue to do so. Thank you for having me on the call today.
Thank you for that. So I have some questions for the presenters, and any of you guys can answer these questions. My first question is, and I think some of you kind of touched base on how did you get into the industry, but what made you want to stay in this industry?
I'm happy to answer that. Representation matters. And so I knew very early on that I needed to be the representation, and that I wanted more women to enter the rooms that I was entering. And so for me, I was just like, if not me, then who? So I was willing to stick it out in the industry.
Yeah, and I'd add, I mean, I think, as Brooke mentioned, being a woman in the industry, you need to know more to prove your seat at the table, right? And I felt that in my soul, right? I think as I've gone along in my career, I've realized, just because you get the microphone doesn't mean you know all of the things. And there's nothing like being like, no, actually, I think that person's wrong, and we need to come together and we need to think about this different strategy. And I haven't been in clean fuels that long. I didn't really say this in my opening remarks, but I've been with the association for about 3 years now, and have always had environmental work, environmental policy, and environmental analysis in my career, but have jumped around industries a bit and came from actually the airline industry to fuels, and having that diverse perspective, thinking about and coming into, I think Brooke's point about the pivot, right, is not just that it's great to learn and grow and seize opportunities that you see, but I think it can help, whether it's an entrenched industry or just a nascent industry, think about their issues in a new way if you come with a different set of experiences, and knowing that even if you're quote an outsider, right? I think I was nervous in my first meetings, right? Being like, well, there's so much I don't know, but there is so much that the people in that room don't know that you do know because you've come from a different background.
I think I can jump in on that too. I can speak to that exactly. It's a really powerful thing to realize that you bring your particular toolkit is unique, and you bring it to whatever the portfolio you present. And for me, because I have been moving around in the energy and policy space for a long time, and those are all different skills. It's policy skills, it's association management, it's folks management, a lot of it. And I will just throw in there and just an acknowledgement of sort of in the particular place of being a woman working in this space. Sometimes it's a great superpower to be underestimated.
For me, working with children since 1990, teaching them entrepreneurship and financial literacy, but also watching what Department of Labor says are career fields that women and people of color are needed in. That has kept me in the game, listening to the women on the call saying what you faced as an adult with being discriminated and underestimated in the workforce. Imagine what our youth now are facing. So it's just important to continue to teach the next generation who will be developing what we use, what's out here, presenting people in the industry for them to see and know that they can become that and more. So that's what's really kept me in the game, gaining knowledge that I can transfer to the youth I work with. And we start in kindergarten, and that's a lot of time when kids are told, oh, you're dreaming too big and you're only 6 years old and you don't really know limitations. So for children of color, it's vital that they know that they can do everything and more that they see their counterparts from around the world doing. So that's what's kept me connected.
Thank you all for that. We have a question from the chat. How are you all handling the current landscape in alternative fuels?
As an entrepreneur, pivot and adapting, is that word we have to deal with. This current administration has made it clear what their goals are, but as an as an entrepreneur in every crisis, we see opportunity. So we started right after the election, just changing our language. So if it was coming from an administration who's saying we're draining the swamp, and I'm not going to go into my personal feelings, but it's important to show municipalities and policymakers the cost savings. And I'll just use one as an example. Telehealth was scheduled to be cut April 25th. So next month, no more billing for telehealth. So it was vital that we get the word out to legislators. If you're talking about reducing cost, using telehealth for medical visits where an x-ray or anything intrusive wasn't needed, you're saving that money that Medicaid and Medicare spends on non-emergency transportation. You're saving families with people who have disabilities and are in a wheelchair. You're reducing a 6-hour day down to 10 minutes. And so it's showing them cost savings because that's what they're looking for. But it's also not just buckling, it's also advocating for things not to be cut, but showing how everyone can win when you work together and you have the consumer in mind. So that's what we've been doing, just relanguaging and advocating.
Yeah, I mean,
think that's great. I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I agree. It's absolutely, it's about, recalibrating the message to be more effective with the current audience. We know the value of the technology and the benefits it provides, and highlighting those benefits that have the most resonance, making sure that people have the facts so that they don't get lost in all the noise. It is an important part of this the message.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just echo that. I think it's, focusing on common goals with your audience, right? I think we have in the clean fuel space, we have massive agricultural interests as they produce the feedstocks to produce our fuel. And so if you're going to talk to Congress people who represent rural districts, you focus on that, right? And I don't think we certainly pivot with the administration's priorities, but I think it's in a way in policy world, right, we're kind of using all of those tools already when we look at the diversity of congressional district makeup. But other than that, it's a lot of my own telehealth therapy to get to help navigate this right now.
We have another question in the chat. This is for Veronica. What are the main challenges the aviation industry is facing with the sustainable aviation fuel?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the biggest piece to so much of this energy transition, right, is cost, and making sure that everything that kind of smooth out those bumps in the road that are, the added cost of getting away from fossil fuels that have had, 150 years of development and scaling and economies of scale. And the aviation industry's challenge, I think the two big pieces of the challenge for them is, the cost, the fuel is always their number one or number two cost. It fluctuates based on labor circumstances, but to have that then switching from fossil fuel to renewable forms of fuel that are 4 or 5 times the cost, it's a challenge. And so you see their investments now in technology forward innovation to try to help bring a diverse pool of alternatives to scale. But I think the other piece of that is really the challenge of their reliance on fuel. You think of electrification on the ground, and that's challenging. We've kind of, I think, got the light duty sector down pretty well. But even looking at the scale for the heavy duty on-road vehicles, things like rail, where you really need that power and that energy density that liquid fuel provides, add into that you have to be in the air, right? And one of the things that I think I learned in my time with the airline industry that I hadn't really considered was also, as you burn fuel, your plane gets lighter, right? So if you were to go all electric, to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, you'd have to throw the batteries out the window as you depleted them, which is just obviously completely absurd. So I think there's a lot of effort that needs to go into finding the diverse sources of energy that we can convert to fuel, those different feedstocks. And the investments that they're making, I think, will help kind of all of transportation, because you're not just making sustainable aviation fuel. When you produce it, you're also making renewable diesel, renewable gasoline, other options too that can help across the fuel fleets, or the transportation fleets, I should say.
Thank you for that. And I think this is a question for everyone that if you guys want to answer. Do you have any advice for young professionals looking to build in-demand skills within the energy industry?
I'll go. I'm at a conference right now, the American Association of Energy Professionals, and so around a lot of folks in the industry. And I would honestly say that the biggest things that I think we need to work on, especially for young folks, is critical thinking skills. Um, I do think critical thinking is sort of a lost art. And in our field, we're often faced with challenges and barriers all the time. Every time we're trying to do good, every time we're trying to come up with a new technology or a new solution, there are constantly challenges and barriers. And so it really requires that critical thinking skill to think through problems and challenges. This is definitely not an industry for people who like predictability. We are a very dynamic industry. And so, you have to be ready to meet those challenges. So I would say, focus on that critical thinking and that problem solving skill.
I would also say taking advantage of scholarships, free training from trade schools, universities, for newcomers into the industry, as well as mentor protege opportunities, while you still have what I call those cute and adorable years where people love to see young people that remind them of how we were at their age, and we're eager to help them enter the career and talk through situations that we, looking back, can show them how to do better. There's so many opportunities that go untapped that we can direct young people to.
That's a really great point. And it's so important to highlight for everyone on this panel has said it's important to know your stuff, of course. And it also is really important to identify mentors and to build your network. Maybe that's what the kids today have lost track of in their embrace of things virtual, but building your network of folks who are climbing with you and people who are already there is so important.
Yeah, and I would add, when the networking, when I was in law school, I remember it was kind of like, oh, networking, right? Like go to an event and try to meet people. And I would encourage people to take that very, very organically, and staying curious. And so you go to an event and think about the things that you're trying to learn, but also just be curious about what other people are doing. And I think that builds more organic relationships where you'll be more likely to say, okay, in 10 years time, oh, I remember so and so was doing that thing, and now it's actually relevant to something that I'm trying to do or something I'm thinking about. And so you also, to me at least, it's also feels easier to actually reach out to someone that you made a real connection with, rather than just another a business card or LinkedIn connection. So I would say that. I would also add, I know we're very focused on the clean cities, the environmental aspects of the energy industry, and I would encourage, if thinking about kind of substantive as the technical nerdy person that I am, kind of thinking about the environmental piece of this, I find in my work that there's a lot of folks that understand the fuel industry, but maybe don't necessarily appreciate the technical aspects of the environmental benefits and the world of actually, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So actually how we quantify these benefits is, to me, what I see as being a very burgeoning space, as, regardless of where American policy is right now. I think, the market signals, as we've kind of mentioned in passing, are that we are decarbonizing, we are trying to improve the environment, and we are holding, corporate America to account for that as well. And so being able to help fill those roles to make sure that it's being done in an informed way, I think is certainly on the rise.
Thank you for that. And we have another question from the chat. Has anyone heard about Dominion as Energy's sheep farm to natural maintain vegetation from solar sustainability land?
I can't say I've heard of it, but it sounds like it may be, maybe Dominion is using sheep to help landscaping around maybe some solar installations or something like that. But I think there is a really interesting nexus between agriculture or forestry and energy in that way. I'm blinking on the term for it right now, but the ability to kind of grow crops underneath and amongst solar panels. And actually, there's some really interesting research about some of the yield improvements that you can get and actually grow agricultural crops better if you have some shade from midday sun and things like that. So certainly an interesting area to explore.
Yeah, I think you're referring to agrivoltaics.
Yes, thank you. I knew it was simple.
Problem. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the project either, but that's what it sounds like.
Thank you for that. I can just make this my last question. What are some key challenges and opportunities you've encountered in integrating equity and sustainability into your work?
I'll go. Yeah, I've endured many challenges. So so what I've done to combat those challenges is, to be very technical, to be very quantitative, I think it was Veronica that said, if you can't manage what you can't measure what you can't manage. So a lot of in our space we have a lot of subjectivity, and we take that as gospel. So if we think, we can't apply equity, or there's, certainly comes up in EV infrastructure planning a lot. It's like, hey, we don't want to put a charging station here because the people in this neighborhood don't own electric vehicles. There are other ways that we can look at that community. And, for example, I work on the assessment of community readiness and the potential for adoption. So we don't just not put infrastructure there for the sake of we don't think it's a good idea. We actually have to study it. We have to do some data research. We have to analyze it. And so I think it's always just easy to write off equity as if it's something that can't be done. And so we really need to prove, and I like to do it in a data-driven fashion, that equity is important. Also, someone mentioned earlier that there is a value to equity. there is always a value to equity. In fact, inequity costs us a ton of money every time that we deploy energy assets, or whether it be charging, whatever it is, in an inequitable fashion. We end up paying for it on the back end, just not the front end. Yeah, it's always a challenge. I put equity into everything that I do. I won't stop doing that. We can keep changing the language. Anytime the language needs to change, happy to change it. But it doesn't change the goal and the value and what I hold true to myself when I do the work.
And I'm happy to build on those great points, and the idea that the cost of inequity is a really powerful thing to make visible to folks. If you can't appeal to people's sense of justice, there's always the wallet. And we look at, I think all of us have some intersection. I'm thinking of clean school buses, for instance, right? I'm doing a webinar on clean school buses later this afternoon. And the fact is, you can do the math, right? There's a business to be made in making more efficient, better performing buses, but there's also some real math about the health effects of little kids breathing in diesel. That's demonstrable. You can not only taste it, you can actually see how much it costs in health detriment. So I think just putting all of those pieces together, there's a lot of reasons why. And as we know, the poor environment has really disproportionate impacts on disadvantaged communities, and just how to connect technology to the problem and make it the viable solution. It's so important.
Yeah, I would add, I think about it in the policy realm and in conversations around environmental policy in this space. And I see, policy is more forward looking, right? And we have impacts now. And I think that's part of why I was interested in the position I currently hold, right? You have biodiesel that reduces particulate emissions that contribute and exacerbate asthma and all sorts of other public health impacts. And you can put that into the school bus today, right? And you can put those into heavy duty vehicles going to port, and in these hubs where we have vulnerable communities. And we can kind of marry that with forward-looking policy to, become zero emission vehicles in those areas, and really, make a further impact. But I think the reality of, tight budgets, added cost, to me, it's a really complementary effort to be able to ensure that we have beneficial outcomes now. And I think that has been a challenge in our space, trying to make sure that we, as biofuels, still have a seat at the table through the transition, because folks are very forward thinking in the policy space.
We know that the poor pay more or less and give way more equity. So protecting communities and being a voice for those who may not have access to who they should speak to, we know it serves everyone well. We've seen what inequity does in our youth, asthma, other illnesses, mental delays. We've seen the numbers increase drastically, and it can be traced back to environments and over consuming the bad things in the neighborhood. So when you actually do the math, it's more efficient to be equitable because of the long-term consequences that eat up budgets and the quality of life, and not allowing, our kids to have that clean air when they're running and playing and riding their bikes, or our seniors who just want to age gracefully in the neighborhood and their community, and lives are cut short. So all of that is very expensive when you add up those bills for healthcare and other services that are then needed. So equity is always the way. That's what I'll always be fighting for. But laying out the argument, because if you don't show it, sometimes they don't know it. And we're holding on to decades and decades of misinformation.
Thank you for that. We have another question from the chat. To maintain consistent renewable and sustainability efforts, we need to communicate the economic advantages from the outset. How to best do it?
I'll take a run at it. That is actually always part of our messaging. We build in there are multiple rationales or benefits, however you want to phrase it, for electrification, and whether that is the cost benefit to consumers, or on a macro level, to say to a school district or to a commercial fleet. There are also, it's energy security, environmental security, but also costs, and we build all those arguments into our messaging from the get-go. We have to be pretty vigilant about, keeping the facts straight. If there's a lot of noise and out there today, so I think it's just about getting the facts straight and making sure they keep getting out there.
Yeah, said the same thing. I mean, it's data, 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 data. Run the data, look at the data. Make sure that you're using data that is kind of indisputable. So I use a lot of public data. Try to take all the biases out, make the numbers pure. And so when you're trying to make that economic argument, just find every way that you can to quantify all of your points. I don't, you're like what someone said earlier, you're not going to change someone's mind. So if they don't agree from a justice standpoint, or they're not for equity, diversity, inclusion, whatever it is. So you have to let the numbers speak for you. So I would just say use good data, real data, let the data speak for itself. And it usually shows at the end of the day that equity is good for economics.
Yeah, I would add, there are, social cost of carbon. There are other tools to translate, public health impacts to, healthcare costs that I think kind of help tell the story. It's unfortunate that all of those externalities continue to be so, right? That we haven't properly quantified them and let them perpetuate. But I think that there's substantial science around how to make those translations so that you can translate that to economic advantages.
In addition to that, educating legislators. Often decisions are made by the information they receive most. So opposing companies sometimes are happy to send over reports that, of course, are in their favor. And if that's all they see, they are making conclusions based on the information they have. So when Maryland put a moratorium on building data centers, the legislators had to be educated to what is a data center? How can it benefit the state of Maryland, the different communities? How can it produce jobs and be more clean? And they didn't have the information when the vote came up. So educating legislators can go a long way.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for answering those questions. Before I turn it over to Antoine, I'm just going to mention membership. We have a new membership portal, Member Planet, that if any of you guys in the chat are not members, to please sign up. And then also, if you need to renew your membership, you have until April 1st to renew. And then also different ways to get involved with the organization by sponsorship, donations, or joining one of our planning committees, especially for the Earth Day 5K that's coming up next month. We need a lot of help with that. So if anyone's interested, I can send over all that information to join the committees, or rather do a donation, or if they're interested in sponsorship opportunities.
All right, let's put our hands together for this amazing moderator and panel. Thank you. You all did let's give them a nice virtual hand clap. Thank you. That was great. A lot of great information, a lot of things to think about, and learned a lot from all of these individuals. One thing I forgot to make sure we went over today is our annual collection of data. We are collecting data for our annual report that goes to the U.S. Department of Energy. If you are a fleet leader, fleet manager, or you have clients that are fleets, we like to be able to, it's a form we can send out, and we'll email all the folks who attended today the information. And we then take that information and send up to U.S. Department of Energy, and then they tally all the data on all the different deployment and training opportunities for different fuels with fleets to reduce greenhouse gases and emissions. So that report has been going on for over 30 years. You can see the data that we submit online, so you can do that. So please look at that as well. I want to just make a couple other things. As Blake mentioned, there is a membership. I see some folks on here are members, some are not. So make sure you members. I want to congratulate Salima Stephen, who we spotlighted one of our members this week. She's doing a lot of great work. She has an event coming up in DC in April as well. Perhaps Salima, you can put that in the chat for folks. Her event is going to be in DC, and I think it's a reduced rate for GWR-CCC members as well. I want to mention that again on Tuesday, March 18th is National Biodiesel Day. So we will have a forum on March 18th at 11 a.m. It should be an exciting 1 hour discussion. So please show up for that forum as well. I also want to remind you on April 19th, go green on April 19th, right? So that's the Earth Day walk, 5K walk. We're going to have a green expo on the mall, and we're also going to have a display of vehicles, and we're going to have a road rally. We're going to have some opportunity to do some ride and drives as well. And so we're looking forward to you all participating in the Earth Day walk and Green Expo and vehicle display. So sign up for that. I did put in the chat as well. We do need volunteers. I want to give a shout out to Kenya Langford, who's going to be volunteering. We'll be reaching out to you next week. Just got a couple little housekeeping things, and then we're ready to get all of our committees. We do have a committee that's working on the exhibits. We have a committee that's working on sponsorship. We have a committee that's working on donations with sponsorship. We also have a committee that's working on vehicles. And then we're going to need a lot of help on logistics and volunteer engagement for that day. As you can imagine, when a walk that's 5K, we're going to need people making sure that if people need water and all that. We'll have a hospitality tent. So we're going to make sure we have hospitality stuff is there. So we're going to need people helping out with that. So please look forward to you all. We'll be really blasting it out. We're partnering with WUSA 9, one of the local TV stations. So we're looking forward to that. And if you are involved and you are sponsored, there may even be some opportunities to go on TV with us. Where every week we're doing live on TV on WUSA 9 as we count down to April 19th. So get involved. And without further ado, I want to thank our team. As we say, every day is Women's Day and every day is Earth Day in our office. So I want to thank you all. Without further ado, until next time, let's keep on making things happen, because together we can make a cleaner, greener future. If Blake and Burrow can stay on, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you all. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.